Thank you for joining me. I have a special guest with me. He is a writer, recording artist, and host of the New Mindset Who This podcast. Please help me welcome author of Single is Your Superpower, Case Kitty. Case, how you doing?
I'm great. How you doing? I love that energy. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Listen, as stated, you're a writer, recording artist, and a podcast host. But you also have a venture called Prsuit, Perspectives That Inspire. This project started for you just out of college as a side hustle, but quickly became your life work. Tell us how or why you pursued Prsuit.
So that was kind of what gave me my start writing online. I've always been a pretty voracious reader and writer, and out of college, living in Chicago, I was like, I really want to find an outlet to share my perspective on things, and specifically perspective that inspires, and not just my perspective, but other people's perspective. So I started writing there, and it did really, really well. It grew to be an email list where I would email people every day. I've actually since taken Prsuit and moved it into New Mindset Who Dis, so it's under that. But that was basically the kickstart to everything. That was what gave me the idea to start podcasting as well. I've been writing for so long with Prsuit that I was like, I really want to challenge myself. And sometimes it's easy to hide behind words online, right? It's easy to edit. And I was like, I want to do something a little bit more vulnerable towards the end of sharing perspective that inspires. I was like, I'm going to start podcasting. So that's what I did, and pivoted Prsuit into New Mindset Who Dis in 2018. And kind of the rest is history.
Yes. Good history. Great history, actually. On the podcast, you're very clear about not wanting to be classified as a life coach. But essentially what you're doing is you're really helping or coaching people along in their life, just from a framework of the things that you've learned or curated through the years. Why are you so against that term, life coach? What is it about it that just irks you?
Yeah. To be clear, I have no problem with people who are genuinely life coaches. There's many people who I know personally who are life coaches, and they do amazing transformative work. So I'm not against those people. I just, myself personally, I really like to be grounded in just being a regular guy whose purpose is being a regular guy, who's leveraging his skills. I mean, in a sense, I am coaching people. I am, giving them perspectives. But in my mind, like, I want to be someone who gives you a question to ask yourself. You ask yourself that question and you transform. I don't want to be the guy telling people what to do. And it never really sat well for me to like charge people for that as well. Just my ethos on what I think is my talent and how I apply it. But it's like, I think a big reason why the podcast is popular, humbly so, in my writing and everything, it's because I've stuck to the I'm a regular guy thing. And it's not like disingenuous, because I truly am just a regular guy. I have no training in this. I don't have a sociology background, a psychology background, anything like that. I truly do not. And I think that helps people kind of take down the divide sometimes that exists in the self-help space. So I do it to like try to ease the friction that I think some people want to go to therapy, but there's a stigma there. Or people, I don't want to listen to a self-help podcast. That's lame. But then like, oh, but Case is just a regular guy. In fact, he's just like a bro. So maybe I will listen. And then it helps change their life. I'm for that. So that's kind of like my thinking there. I have no problem with anyone else who is truly a life coach. It's just for me, I'd rather be a regular guy giving regular perspectives that change people's lives. And that is delicious to me. And I'll keep doing that.
Yes.
All I can.
And it works. It's true to who you are. So yes, keep doing that. We love that. You're host of the show, and we said it, New Mindset Who This or Who Dis. I love that. Why that title? It jogs some thoughts for people, but why did you pick that for your podcast show?
Yeah, well, it came from the inspiration of, sometimes when people lose a phone or their number and someone texts you, you're like, oh, new phone, who dis? Like, I don't know who is this? I don't know who you are, who's texting me. And the whole idea was that like the transforming your mindset can be a complete overhaul of who you are. So it's like, I'm a new person. Who's this? Like, what's up? Like, wow, I am 2.0. I am completely transformed, evolved, shifted, whatever word you want to use. So I did it like just like colloquially. It's like people get it. They get what that means, because I truly believe in the transformative power of your mindset. The mindset is everything. Mindset is how you react to life, and it's how you decide what to do in life. And I can't really think of any other way to live a happy and fulfilling life by controlling your reaction to things and then deciding what to do with your goals and your objectives. That's life. So that's why I named it that. All things mindset. I mean, that's what I talk about on it. More broadly, I talk about mindfulness, and I want to make mindfulness more approachable, to my point a minute ago. And I kind of landed on that. And I try to keep things light. I think I really wasn't into mindfulness or meditation or many of those things until my late 20s, because I thought it was lame, frankly. I thought it was people using words like chakra and vibration and frequency. And I was like, I don't know what these people are talking about. It's kind of lame. So I was like, I want to pick a vibe, a brand for myself that just not necessarily makes mindfulness cool, but makes it approachable and makes it fun and engaging and relevant. So that's kind of why I chose that angle.
You talk about not being into meditation and all those things at a certain age in your life. And it's, from my vantage point as a creator, and I know you can test the same thing, it's very hard not to develop or evolve as you're learning and doing self-work, and you're helping other people as you help yourself. How was your mindset prior, I guess, to this mindfulness that you have now personally? What was your mindset like back then?
I think it was just kind of uncertain. Like, I think it would be just best characterized by like a lack of self-awareness. Not like destructive lack of self-awareness, but I just didn't really know myself well. I didn't take the time to know myself. I didn't take the time to dig into the things that bothered me or confused me or that I was curious about. I just didn't take the time to do it. Same person, just there was no active practice of self-awareness. And all self-awareness is mindfulness, and mindfulness is self-awareness. So that's all it was. And I think I just made that decision that, I want to be happier. I want to be more fulfilled. I want to be more confident. How do I do that? Well, it's not by faking it. It's by knowing yourself better and not leaving questions unanswered. So I was like, I'm going to start doing this. So that's why I started doing the podcast as a challenge to myself. I was like, what more powerful way is there than to practice self-awareness than by doing it out loud? Like, that's a challenge. That's tough. And at the same time, it's going to help me with my public speaking skills and just critical thinking and those kinds of things. Like, this is going to be great. So truly, like, I always say that the podcast is obviously for other people because I'm very aligned with that goal, but it's also for me. It's like, it's my form of therapy. Like, I don't go to a therapist. I think it's very healthy. People absolutely should. Personally, I find this to be my form of therapy on the podcast twice a week, me talking through my perspectives, trying to come up with clarity through the questions that I have about life. So it's like a skill. It's like a muscle. Like, previously, I never worked out. Now I work out and I do it twice a week on the podcast. And it's a muscle that I've grown and I've practiced it and I'm better at it. Like, self-awareness, mindfulness is something that you get better at. It's not like you're a self-aware person or you're not a self-aware person. It's like you grow to do that. So that's my story.
Wow. You talk about mindset being a muscle. I'm curious, sometimes when we're working out in the gym, you can bench press 100 and then you work at it. And next thing you know, you're lifting 200. What was that moment in your story that you said, I noticed, the pivotal moment that you noticed your mindset muscle was getting stronger?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I feel like mindfulness is a muscle, but I think combined with like my just natural, I'm a very optimistic person. I've always been that way, like glass half full, like to the point where my friends, like, I'm annoying to my friends because I'm always like, oh, it's no worries. We got a flat tire, no biggie, whatever. I've always been that guy. So I think when I combined that with like diving into why am I so positive and optimistic, that was when I really started realizing that, I've grown into this person. I can't really put like a time or date or circumstance on it, but it would definitely, I would say like 29, 30, like those, I just turned 33 a couple days ago, and like 29 to 33, 32, like it's been such a pivotal time in my life. And I think that's when I've really been like, oh man, like there's been so much tangible power behind the question of why. Like, that's all mindfulness is why, asking yourself that. And I just like, man, I look back, I've asked myself why so many times over the past, call it 5-6 years, man, it's really paying off because I do it naturally now. I think the inclination for me previously was to have a frustration or an anxious thought or something bothering me in life. I wouldn't take the time to do that. But now it's like, man, my natural reaction now is to sit down and practice self-awareness. That's growth. Like, that is proof of the application of this. Oh, and I'm also happier. I'm like genuinely happier. Like, man, this stuff definitely works.
Yeah, absolutely. You're the author of a beautiful book called Single is Your Superpower. Catch feelings for yourself. And I say it's beautiful because, first of all, the cover is lovely. But then when you open it up, the layout, it is no secret that you didn't go with the traditional layout. You wrote this in formatted this in a way that was much different from what we see in books. Tell us why you decided to structure the book the way you did. Is there some thought behind that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for picking up a copy. That means a lot. Thank you. And for the kind words. Yeah, it's definitely not a book, right? So it looks like a book, feels like a book, but it's not. It's like half book, half journal, workbook. It's tough to put a title on it. And I did that specifically because I can sit down, I can go to the bookstore and I could buy the top self-help book. And it's a book, right? 200, 300 pages, whatever. I can read it. I can be like, man, they made some good points, really cool stuff. A week later, I've already forgotten about it. So I think about my behavior and like what really, cements an idea or a concept. And I need to be active. I need to be writing, feeling, touching, doing this in the book with a pen and paper. And so I was like, I don't want just to spit perspective at people. I want people to then take that perspective and provide their own clarity. So that's why the book is like, it's a chapter and then it's an exercise. It's a chapter, then it's an exercise. And specifically for this book, it's about relationships. Why are you dating? What are you looking for? What do you need? What are your standards? What are your boundaries? And I look at my dating life in my 20s. I never took the time to actually think about that. I was like, yeah, of course I've got high standards, of course. But it's like, well, what are they? Boom, write them down. Or it's like, people will be like, hey, so, what are you doing? Why are you dating? I'm like, what do you mean? Why am I dating? I'm just dating. Of course I'm supposed to date, but why are you dating? Write it down. And I just found so much clarity comes from writing down a question that we might ponder, but we never take the time to actually solidify it. There's a big difference between answering a question in your head than writing it down on paper. So that was it. That was simple. I just wanted to make it cool, actionable, and lean forward. I find that reading books can be a very passive experience. I want this to be very active. Lean back versus lean forward. I want this to be lean forward. And I made it short so that you're not overwhelmed. It's like 10, 12 chapters and you're done. But at the course of that, you've done over 30 exercises. And that's the real value.
So true. You titled these chapters so interestingly, and they're funny to me. And we'll talk about a couple of them. But this chapter 2 is titled "Wanted Cuddles But Got Struggles." I think some of us can attest to that. I'm going to read an excerpt from that chapter. If you're reading this, you're single, or you're considering becoming single. You might actively be dating, but you haven't found anything serious. You might be dating and you have no idea of what you're doing. You might not even be dating at all. Regardless, you're single in the sense that you have not yet found your person. Talk about your person or the person, or we hear that term thrown around so loosely, the one.
Yeah.
How do you identify the one or your person?
Yeah. It's such a good question and such a tough topic. It's the idea of soulmates, right? Your person is your soulmate, and your soulmate is someone that you was put on this earth for you, and you were put on this earth for them. It's a pretty wild concept, frankly, if you really sit down and think about it. And I don't know how I really feel about that, right? That you were born and there was a spark and someone else was born and you guys are going to find each other, hopefully. I'm not so sure if I believe that, but I do believe that everyone has a person. It might be many people, but there's a certain type of person, and that person and you to them are put on earth to make each other feel a certain way. And that is it. And so the whole idea of the book is checklists are important, right? It's important to have a checklist of what you want in someone. It's good to know physically what you're attracted to, kind of mannerisms or worldviews. It's important to have those conversations with yourself. But I think this idea of your person supersedes that in the sense that there is someone out there who is going to make you feel a perfect way. And I call this idea of perfect love for imperfect people. No one's perfect. No relationship is perfect. I've often found that your person is the person who's going to hurt you the most, likely accidentally. Everyone is imperfect, but there is a perfect way that you want and deserve to feel. And that can come in many different forms. The idea of the book is discovering what that means to you. To feel a certain way could mean, I want to feel supported. I want to feel loved. I want to feel challenged. I want to feel whatever. You need to come up with what that is for yourself. But to me, that is the definition of your person. Your person is going to make you feel a perfect way. That person is an imperfect person. You are an imperfect person. Your relationship is likely going to be imperfect, but they're going to make you feel a perfect way, and you're going to make them feel a perfect way. But it's up to you to understand what that perfect way is. It's a way that's aligned with your standards, your boundaries, your why. Why are you dating? What do you deserve? Everything. It's you throw it all in a smoothie and you come up with this thing, and that's the way that you want to feel. So yeah, that's the whole idea. Whenever I reference like a soulmate or your person, it's that person who makes you feel the way that you deserve to feel. And the crazy thing about life is you might change your mind. That's like we go through seasons. Like you might think that you need to feel a certain way in your 20s, only to mature in your 30s to realize that was only half the equation. It's actually this way. And that's the beautiful thing about choice and maturity and growing. And I think if you constantly are asking yourself these questions, you could hone in on it, accept nothing less, and make decisions that are really compassionate for yourself.
So good. You kind of hesitated at the beginning when you're talking about the one, and I kind of felt you there. And I'm going back there intentionally because I know there are so many people who hang their hat on this concept of having this one person or this ideal soulmate. Although you didn't articulate it, I can tell I agree with you on the concept because I don't buy into the notion of it being the one or a soulmate or a person out of all the billions of people in the world. I, however, buy into the notion that we make a decision on who we choose to love. And we do that based on, like you said, our thoughts and ideas of what love is, what we want, what they want. So I believe that we decide to love a person and we commit to that decision, but to have just this perfect person or this person that was just made for you is an idea that I think is not rewarding, and it won't serve you well because people, like you said, are ever changing. So that individual can be the perfect person right now. I think we've all had that high school sweetheart and we just thought that was it forever. You know what I mean? And then you get in your 20s and 30s and you're like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? Who is this girl? Like, I can't believe I spent 15 years, like all of my adolescence in love with you. You understand what I'm saying? I don't want to shove you into, but I'm just so curious to hear your thoughts on that soulmate idea. I mean, personally speaking, and why there was a little hesitation in that.
Yeah, I think we're very much on the same page. I think you just articulated very well what I was getting at. I think that's exactly it. I mean, I've always been one to think that the world's a big place. There's lots of fish in the ocean. And I think that's not like a selfish mentality. I think it's a compassionate mentality, because if you buy into this idea that there is one singular person on this earth for you and your soulmate, I find that a lot of times what happens is we overthink our existing relationships. We're slower to act when our intuition is telling us to move on. Because the reality is, to your point exactly, there are people who are put in your life for a reason, but that reason is temporary. But if we're convinced ourselves that there's one true soulmate in our lives, I find that a lot of times we hang on to people that truthfully, they've served their purpose, you've served your purpose in their life, and you should both move on. And that's the healthy, compassionate growth mindset that we should have. You shouldn't be holding on to people who aren't meant to be in your life forever, and you're not meant to be in their life forever. And there's so many examples where that's true, of course. I think everyone realized that there are people who played enormously compassionate and helpful roles in your life and yours and theirs, but that was all it was. It was meant to be temporary. You were both meant to take lessons from each other, grow through them, and transition into the next season of your life. But I think if you're bought into this idea that there's one person in your life, you're going to be like, well, I don't want to let go. You're going to go into this massive overthinking, and that's not helpful at all. So I think it's like life is this balance, right? It's a balance of being grateful for what you have and not having grass is greener syndrome, but it's also balanced by a sense of recognizing when a phase has served its purpose for both people and then moving on and having that be a growth mindset as opposed to, just kicking the can down the road. So totally agree with what you said, frankly. It's all about, your priorities change, your growth changes. As a person, you change. And I think we need to respect that. And sometimes that means moving on. And I think that's the healthy, compassionate thing to do for yourself and for the other person.
So true. In chapter 3, I believe you talk about the why behind dating. And I think this is so necessary for many because, like you said, I think we haphazardly date and we don't even consider a why. We just say, hey, well, and some of us do consider a why, and it may be just a little selfish at the end. Talk about that why and why it's important in dating.
Well, it's a small thing, but I think it makes all the difference. Like I talk to people all the time and I ask them, like before I even go into it, I'm like, so why are you dating? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, I'm supposed to date. Like, we're not supposed to be alone. I don't want to be alone. Purpose on life is to meet someone, grow together, maybe start a legacy together, have a family together. What do you mean? Why am I dating? That's why I'm dating. And I think those are great reasons. Of course, there's something biological to dating. There's something sociological to dating. You don't want to be alone. Those are very fine answers. But I found that when it comes to dating and relationships, it has to be a little bit more selfish. It's a tough word to say. It's selfish. It's self-serving. Like, you have to approach dating from a perspective of, I am dating because XYZ. Like, and it could be, I want to find someone who helps make me a better man. I think that's a great why. I want to meet someone who checks my ego. I want to meet someone who does this or that. Or to be on the flip side, I'd be like, I am dating because I want to hook up. I just want to meet people, have fun. It is what it is. Those are two very acceptable whys. They're honest and they're intentional. But what I found, at least from my personal life in my 20s, I never took the time to do that. I'd be on the dating apps. I'd be going on dates, never understanding why I'm dating. And then I'd get in these situations where it'd be like, oh, well, maybe I'm not really ready to date. I probably should have adjusted my why so that I could have communicated that, aligned with someone who respected that or didn't, and just things would be more smooth. So again, I think this is just like the baseline sense of self-awareness when it comes to dating. Like, you just have to have a why, and it could be any why. There's no right why or wrong why. You're not a bad person if you're like, I just want to hook up. You're not too serious if you want, I want to find my soulmate. Either are fine, but I think you just need to keep drilling it down to a further level and ask yourself, like, why am I looking for someone? Well, my why is the most cliche why in the world, but it's, I want to meet someone who makes me a better person. But I think that's great. Someone else's might be different. Again, everyone has different things that they're working on. But I think taking that step takes a lot of the ambiguity out of dating and your decision making, because then when you're dating, you can come back to that question. You'd be like, is this person going to help further that why? Am I moving in a direction towards that why? No? Well, then we probably should stop seeing each other. That's good news. And then you go from there. But without it, you're kind of just in the wind, not really being that intentional. And that's never a good thing. So it's just like a quick exercise you could do that I think is really helpful.
So good. You talk about a long-term relationship that you were in that ended for whatever reason. I'm curious, in that period or in your relationship dating life, did it birth any of this content that we're seeing in this book, Single is a Superpower? Did you learn any things in those relationships? And if so, what specifically can you speak to publicly, I should say?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm an open book on this stuff. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, my story is I was like a serial monogamist in my 20s. I always was in relationships, 2-3 year relationships. And those were great. They were great women, but ultimately it didn't work out. And I think that was such a blessing. My last like long-term relationship was when I was 29, and I've been single for the past 3 years. And coming out of that relationship, I was like, man, it's just like, I really wasn't that intentional with why I was dating in the first place. I had taken a lot of time to invest myself in my identity in that relationship. I was like, who is Case outside of a relationship? Well, I hadn't really taken the time to discover that. So, I mean, yeah, everything in the book, everything in the podcast that I talk about, my writings, quotes, everything is from probably the last 3-ish years that I've learned. I have this great contrast, I think, of dating and being in relationships for 10 years, being single for 3 years, and understanding what I've learned in each season of my life, and now combining them. I feel like I have this amazing perspective that's more compassionate for myself, the decisions that I'm capable of making, the communication I'm capable of relaying to a potential partner. And I think it's just been powerful. It's like that balance is what I needed. I think it's what people need. Not that there's anything wrong with only dating, but I think being single for a while is sometimes it's the clarity you need, that when you get back into dating, it's exactly what you needed. So yeah, everything in there is perspective from the past couple of years.
You talk about being a serial monogamist, and speaking of clarity, I'm curious, looking back at that period of your life, what did you learn about yourself? Were you trying to just fill a void? Were you just going with the cultural expectation? We're supposed to date and I'm supposed to be married. What was your thought process when you were dating random people through your 20s?
Yeah. So I think it was a combination of two things. I think it was one, not wanting to be alone, which I think is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But then I also think about like who I was in my 20s. And at that time, I didn't really like have what I would say is like my purpose in life, or my passion, or kind of like my North Star as far as the impact that I'm capable of. So I had been hopping around a couple of jobs, really trying to find it, and like really hadn't found it. So I think the relationship filled that spot right? Having someone who validated me and I validated her, and it was right, and it was purpose driven. I was like, okay, well, that's kind of taking the place of this missing area of my life, which is greater creative purpose. So I think those combination of the two is what led me to really have that mindset. But I think it was very healthy. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think popping out of that last relationship when I was 29, I was like, deep breath. Okay, now I have this opportunity to, one, realize that being single doesn't mean I'm lonely. That's a big vibe. And two, okay, I have all this time now. Now I'm really going to figure out what impact I can make in life. I've always been super like creative and like purpose driven, but like I am going to figure out what it is now. And I'm doing it. And that's been super rewarding. So now I can look at a relationship or dating with more clarity, I think, because I'm not looking to fill any voids with a relationship. I think it's much healthier, or not even healthier. Maybe it's just more mature, right? I've just grown a lot through it. So look, again, hindsight is very 2020. I would never say this when I was in my 20s, right? But now I think that's pretty clear to me. And I think people can relate. If I had a nickel for every time someone told me they got in a relationship because they were lonely, I'd be wealthy. And so hopefully that helps some people, because I don't think I'm unique in that experience, but it's pretty transformative coming out of that.
Wow. In chapter 6 of the book, it is so hilarious to me when I read it. You title it Kanye Attitude, Drake Feelings. I found this to be so funny just because of the analogy, really. But tell me why you use that analogy and what point you're bringing out in that particular chapter.
Yeah, I mean, for that, I just tried to make it fun. I was trying to think of the most like caricature examples of confidence and vulnerability that I could think of in like pop culture. I was like, well, Kanye is very loud and full of himself and bravado. And then, Drake is like sad music Drake, very in his feelings, right? So I was like, what more relevance is there? But obviously, it's the underlying message that matters. And that just being that, I think the two greatest qualities that you can represent in a relationship and that I think people should look for in a partner in a relationship is this idea of drive and vulnerability. I think in a partner, at least personally, and I think this really serves anyone, is you should look for someone who has a drive for more, just something more. It doesn't have to be they want to, have a $1 billion startup or change the world. It's just something that drives them, some kind of fire, some kind of curiosity. They've got to have something more than Monday through Friday, Saturday brunch, Sunday TV, Monday do it all over again. Just something that drives them. It could be a passion for traveling. It could be they really love dogs, anything, just some kind of passion that drives them, that keeps them curious and not stagnant. I think that's so important in a person and also in a relationship. I think it's very emblematic of a relationship. And then on the flip side, I think Drake feelings speaks for itself. I think everyone should have the ability and should really push themselves and their partner to be vulnerable, to be real, to be honest, to be emotional, to be soft when needed. And I think that combination is the best. That is balance. Like, it's yin and yang. It's confidence with vulnerability. It's bravado combined with humility. And I think that type of just lens through which to look at life and yourself and a partner is really important. I think a lot of times it's tough to find that, right? You find a partner who is great and amazing, but they lack one or the other. It's like, okay, well, let's just consider this. Like, let's understand, like, well, what do you need in a partner? I think most people would need a certain amount of vulnerability in a partner. I think the idea of drive and fire in a partner is important as well. So it was just my 2 cents on what to look for in a partner. You talk about making checklists. I always think that make a checklist. But at the top, put attitude and then feelings. And then from there, put whatever else you want. But put those somewhere at the top because I think it's really, really important.
You say the real love language in your book. You talk about that and you say it is not what we've learned I think the book is called The 5 Love Languages, touch and feel. And although those are real and those do play a part, but you coined the real love language as honesty. Share with us why honesty is so important in relationship. And it sounds like it should be common sense, but for many, it's not always. So why is honesty important?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I mean, people are like, well, duh. But again, like, being human is the funniest thing, right? We all know you're supposed to be honest, but we don't do it. So that's why, like, I'm not afraid to say every cliche in the book because we need these reminders. I need these reminders. So when I think about love languages, I think the book's great. I talk to people all the time about my love languages, and I think it's a very accurate way to express yourself. But I think ultimately, the ultimate love language is that sense of honesty, both with yourself and with your partner. And it's honesty. It's like the biggest challenge that I've seen that is a disconnect in partnerships and relationships is this focus on here versus tomorrow. And I just find a lot of the times with relationships, we're very focused on where the relationship can go and might go and hopefully will go, right? Man, a year from now, we're going to be going on trips together. It's going to be great. Maybe we're living together. We're really going to have bonded, oh, he's going to finally be done with this really intense time at his job. It's going to be great a couple months from now. But I think the honesty part is right now in this moment, if nothing were to change, is this good enough for you, for your partner, for yourself, for every aspect? Like that's the real love language, and the most powerful, long-lasting relationships I've ever seen, the most rewarding parts of the relationships I had in my 20s that were long 3-year plus relationships were those moments where we can come together and be honest with each other about the current state of the relationship, not the future, not where we can possibly go, not where we will go, because it's great to talk about the future, but I think there's grounding needed in the present that is so powerful. And that's honesty. And then of course it's application of honesty. It's just being honest with your partner, just saying what you're feeling. I think it's pretty obvious, but we don't do it. I've always struggled with that. I've always been slow to open up. So I think it's just such a huge vibe to like really center in on that. And I think it'll serve you really, really well.
I know you don't want to be coined as a coach, but I know you have some perspective on this. And I want to talk about this from the vantage point, I guess, from the perspective of the women, because I encounter a lot of ladies that are looking for a good man or looking for this or looking for that. But many have trouble, and maybe they shouldn't even be looking. That's a whole nother conversation. But how does a young lady put herself in the place where she can even be noticed to even start the dating process? Because we're talking about singleness as a superpower, but when you're ready to get into that dating or marriage life, how do you even put yourself in the place? What kind of perspective do you have on that?
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty blunt. I mean, I respect, ceremony. I respect a man chasing a woman and taking the lead and kind of being alpha in that sense. I respect that. I think there's certain gender-driven roles that are appropriate if you so want to believe it. But I think if you're a single woman and you want a partner and you've done all these exercises and you know your why and you're excited and you've got standards and you're ready to rock and you're just like, I can't meet anyone. I think it comes down to like, there are so many ways. You've just got to be the person to make the first move. And I know a lot of women don't like that idea of making the first move, but personally, in my life, I think a woman who makes the first move is like the sexiest, most attractive thing. I really do. And I'm talking about like very basic stuff. I'm talking about like sliding in the DM of a guy you like, not in like a sleazy, gross way, but just being like, hey, I think you're really cute. I think you're really great. I'd love to go out sometime. I think I've always just wondered, it's like in life, going after what you want is this universally applauded thing, right? It's like we applaud anyone who goes after their dream job and they get it. We applaud anyone who flies to LA to do a tryout for whatever, right? Sports, talent, whatever. We applaud that. But then all of a sudden, when it comes to dating, it's like, oh, that's only for the men to do. Like women, you need to be on the receiving end. And again, I totally respect women who are like, I want to be chased. I want to be this, that, and the other. And I think that's great. But I don't think there's anything wrong with making the first move. I don't think we need to draw a line in life and say, oh, it's applauded there, but here, not so much. That's like my like no BS approach to that. So yeah, I think making the first move is a big thing, especially if you're a woman. Like I think women would be surprised how infrequently men get like compliments. Women compliment women all the time. Men compliment women all the time. Men don't get as many compliments. Men get compliments for sure, but not nearly as much. So if you're a woman and you find a guy really attractive, or you know about him and you know he represents values that you're really into, and you give him a compliment, that dude's gonna remember it and he's gonna be struck by it and he's gonna be like, oh wow. Like for the most part, I'm generalizing here, but it's true. So you're a woman and you're like, I want to date and I want to date that person, and you just go for it. You're like, you can't sit around hoping and waiting that someone's going to approach you. Like life is lean forward. Like you got to go after what you want. And I think it's entirely appropriate. I don't think it makes anyone over eager, overzealous. I always hated the word thirsty. Like you're not thirsty for asking someone out. I'm sorry. If someone that says you're thirsty, then they're the wrong person for you. And then they're judging themselves through that comment. So I just go for it. Like I think it's an amazing quality for anyone, men, women, to make that decision and just do it.
I completely agree with you. And on all of that, I'll add to that because I think what women don't realize is sometimes, particularly when you have a woman who has her stuff together, many women out here now, they have their business straight, they know how to take. So that can be sometimes intimidating, even to the most professional and the most I got it together type of man. And sometimes you extending that offer, like, hey, just lets them know, oh, I can approach her. Because many men, what women don't realize, might look at you for years and be like, man, she ain't gonna talk to me. Or, man, she probably got everybody on her jock, or everybody, or she got a man. Just by the way you look and the way you carry yourself, we make those assumptions. So we'll pull back just on the strength of we've assumed. Just because by the way you carry yourself that you got somebody or somebody already checking for you. So there's no room for me in your life. And you find out after searching or whatever you do to approach that woman that not only is she not have anybody, but there's nobody in the picture, in view. So a lot of women don't realize that. So your advice to them is, I think, necessary. Take the first move and like I say, in a graceful and ladylike way, but don't be shy in going after what you want. I think that is great, great advice. You subtitle the book, Catch Feelings for Yourself. And when I think about that, I'm wondering, do you feel in our society we put too many emphasis on relationships or marriage or finding the perfect mate? Do you think we emphasize that too much?
In a sense, yes. I think we emphasize the lack of that too much. Like, I think we should continue to applaud the power of love and connection and compatibility. But there's this developed contrast to that, which is if you don't have it, you better hurry up. You're falling behind. There's something wrong with you. And that's what we need to fix. That's why I named the book Singular's Superpower. That's why I say, don't worry about catching feelings for someone else. That's going to happen. Catch feelings for yourself first. It's just like, I really want to break down this stigma that being single is either a bad thing, it's something that should be rushed through, it's something that you'll regret. Because I just think those are so off base. And again, I'm basing this on my life. Relationships, now I'm single, and I've got a good contrast there. And I just really believe in the power of being single. And I feel bad for people who put themselves in a corner when they're single and they start to have negative thoughts about themselves, that there's something wrong with them. Everyone else has a partner, but I haven't. There's something wrong with me. And then taking it a step further, people start to settle just so they don't be single anymore. And that's in reaction to society. I really do think that's in reaction to society. It's, there's this stigma that, you shouldn't be single for too long. Otherwise, there's something wrong with you. And I just don't think that's true at all. So, I think we should continue to applaud the marriage, having children. That's fantastic. Of course, I want that. But I think until you get there, there's nothing wrong with it. And I think we're getting to that point of understanding. People are really embracing being single, not just being single so you could I could do whatever I want. This is great. But just so you could truly love yourself and realize that I think a lot of times people assume that being single, being alone means you're lonely. And I just think that there truly is a big difference between being alone and being lonely. And I think sometimes we don't take the time to really examine that, and we genuinely feel lonely, when the reality is, if we just kind of tweaked our mindsets a little bit, we would realize just an amazing time it is to be single. And the way that I think about it is, it's like, of all the things you might regret in your life, I don't think you'll ever look back, let's say 10 years from now, I don't think you'll ever look back and be like, of all the things I regret in my 20s or 30s, I regret being single. I don't think that's possible. I really don't. I think there's other things you'll regret. I regret being in that toxic relationship. I regret staying in that relationship. I regret saying yes to that date when I shouldn't have. But I genuinely don't think it's possible to look back and be like, man, I regret that time for 5 years when I was single. I've asked myself this looking back. I've asked my grandparents this. No one ever says that. And that's because I genuinely think being single, it's a great time. It's not a time to skip through. It's not a time to feel pressure and then lower your standards to escape from it. It's a time just to catch feelings for yourself. So I feel very passionate about that, because I don't want anyone to feel alone in the sense that because they're 35 and without a partner, or they're 29, but they've been single for the last 10 years without a partner, that there's something wrong with them. It's just life. You just haven't met your person yet. And that's fine. And you should celebrate the time you have in between. So big on that. I can go on and on, but I'm passionate about helping people realize that.
You mentioned toxic relationship, and I want to go here just briefly. In your opinion, what makes a relationship toxic?
Yeah. Well, gosh, I guess there could be so many. I think probably the biggest basis for anything toxic would just be a misalignment with honesty and intentions. You think about F boys and like what they're doing there. It's a relationship where one person has one assumption about the relationship and another person has another one that hasn't been represented. Like for, F boys and like those, I call them F humans, they're trying to convince the other person that there's more potential in their relationship than there actually is. And there's nothing more toxic than that. When you're feeding into someone's base emotion for compatibility and future growth together, and you're saying and doing things to get them to buy into that, but when you're really not intentional about it, that is truly toxic. I'd say that's the basis. It's a misalignment as far as intention goes, and then honesty as far as communicating that. And it's super tough. Some people are really, really good at like stringing people along, and it's super harmful. And I wish people wouldn't do that, but humans are going to human and it's going to happen. But I think you take the time to try to understand what the warning signs are of that and the honest conversations you could have. Hopefully you could identify it and make a decision that's, compassionate for yourself.
Yeah. When you think of superpower, we think of these superheroes we see in the movies that have all these special, unique talents, if you will. You coined singleness as a superpower. What is it about singleness? How does our superpower show up typically in singleness? What elements of special gifts do we have in our singleness that we may not necessarily have in, let's say, a long-term relationship?
Yeah, well, I think the most cliche one, which I brushed over earlier, is, when you're single, you truly do have more free time and less responsibility towards other people. Like it's the most appropriate time in your life to be selfish. And I think being selfish can be totally transformative in a really compassionate way. So I think that's genuinely it. I think about my life. And I'm telling you, like up until that last relationship, I really hadn't found like who I am as a man, what I represent, what I want to do with what I think my skills and talents are in life. And being single and really leaning into it over the past couple of years has shown me that. And I can't think of a more powerful growth transmission than that. So, it's the right time to be self-centered because you need to. If you're constantly focused on trying to grow something with someone else, that's fantastic. But if you've skipped over the time where being selfish can be a growth catalyst, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. So I think it's an amazing time I'm talking about anything like art, music, passion, whatever it is that you've been curious about, that you've thought about, that is pulling at your heart in some way, like that is the time to figure it out. Because you never know when one experience, one thought, one activity, one yes, one no, whatever it is, might truly change your trajectory of who you are, what you're capable of, what you want to do. And there's no more appropriate time than when you're single. You don't have someone else that you should be caring for, giving your energy to. You could take all that energy and give it to yourself. And that's amazing. Full focus on yourself over a short amount of time or a long amount of time. It's truly, truly powerful. So that's it. It's a matter of time and effort, and you have that when you're single.
I'm curious, you've done a lot of work, you've experienced relationships and done a lot of work on yourself. Do you ever think about maybe the work you're doing and presenting it such a public platform? Do you ever think about maybe it being intimidating to the next woman that you're supposed to be with? Are you ever thinking about that at all?
Yes, I think about who I am online and who I am in real life. And it's definitely the same person, but obviously online, it's the most curated, perfect, filtered version of myself. I don't think anyone's intimidated by me. I feel like I'm pretty harmless in that sense. No, I don't really think about that. Like I am dating someone right now, and I generally try to avoid like dating someone who listens to the podcast regularly, just because it's blank slate. Like let's just go into this blank slate. Like you'll learn this about me eventually. There's no need to like listen up front. Like let's just vibe out before, no assumptions about each other. I try to do that.
I think that's a brilliant approach. And I think that's why so many our Hollywood celebrities tend to take to people who don't know nothing about them. You know what I mean? Because you don't come in with this preconceived notion of, oh, this is so-and-so. So they definitely have this much money. Their house should look like this. And I think women don't realize they do it, but they do it. So if they come in knowing Case Kenny is this, and this, and I heard podcast number 17 and you said, you have all these preconceived notions about who he is, and Case may have evolved from podcast number 17. You know what I mean? So I think it's such a great approach to hopefully engage with someone that does not know the brand Case Kenny and just enjoys who they met at the Super Bowl party or at the picnic or whatever. So I think that's a brilliant place to be. And a great tip for those who are public figures of whatever kind. Before we close out here, you express yourself in so many facets creatively. What brings you most joy when you're creating?
It's a weird thing. Well, for one, it's a combination of music. Like I feel so alive when I can share my perspectives and listen to the right music and just sit down and just like pour out what I'm feeling. It is weird. Like people always ask me like, Case, like, how do you come up with these topics? Like, what's your process? Like, how did you write a book? Like people would be amazed. Like I wrote the books, I wrote my journals in like a matter of days. It just like comes out and it is very cathartic. So like I'll sit here in Chicago, I live on the river. I'll sit in my chair there. I'll put on the right music. I'll give myself a prompt and I'll take a deep breath and I'll be like, just whatever I'm feeling. And it's so rewarding because I think about how I used to be and it would take a lot to like really get a full feeling out of me, you know? And now it's just like, I just go and it just feels really good. It's like this raw creative epicenter that I could always tap into. I say it is really cool because, you know, you hear about this 10,000 hour rule, right? That it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. And there's something to be said about practice. Like I never used to like be really like confident in my words or like storytelling or expressing myself. And like now I love it. I love speaking. I love talking. I think I'm decently good at it. I just love the process. And there's nothing more rewarding than getting better at something and to help other people in the process. So it's cool. Like, and it's my own therapy. So every time I sit down, it's like this grab bag of great things. It's my own therapy. I'm jamming out to great music. I know I'm about to help, you know, 100,000 people who are going to listen to the podcast on the first day, all these things. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm living such a privileged life. So it's a combination of all those things. And I just really, really enjoy it.
I'm curious, being a writer myself, what's your thing when it comes to writing? I know some writers, they write better in the morning. Some write better in the evening. Yeah. Some just need a cup of coffee. They can go all day. What is your thing? Do you have to have certain environment?
Yeah. So my thing is 2 cups of coffee. I have to write before 12 noon, the right music. And then my methodology of writing is I write as fast as humanly possible. I get everything out as humanly possible. And then I go back in and like correct everything grammatically, spelling, etc. If you were to look at like the aftermath of that first breath of creativity, it is all red highlights. It is ugly because I'm spelling everything wrong. I'm flying. I'm trying to get it out. I'm vibing. I'm going as fast as I can, which sounds weird because most people would be like, oh, you go slow, be intentional. I'm like, no, I am vibing. I'm getting it all out, just big, deep breaths and out. And it works really well. So yeah, I'll do that first draft. I'll take a big step back, come back an hour later, edit everything, come back an hour later, edit it one more time, and then do with it what I will. Yeah, I know myself pretty well at this point. I don't write well at night. I write well in the morning, 2 coffee, music, write, get it all out.
Yeah. So good. And I'm the very opposite. I write better in the evening. And the later, the better, when everything's still, no commotion. But some will be surprised that you're a recording artist in addition to being I don't want to say life coach, but a person who helps people with their life. Talk to us about your music compositions and what you're doing in that arena.
That's so funny. Yeah. So like to my point, I love music. Specifically, I love like house music. Like I love loud, bassy, and anything EDM I love. I'm from Chicago, home of house music, but I love loud, bassy, rhythmic, progressive, uplifting, melodic music. There's something about it that just makes me really vulnerable and honest. Like I'm sure everyone can relate to a certain song that makes them feel a certain way. For me, it's like a whole genre of music that just the journey of that music, the repetition of that music puts me in this mind frame where I'm like, oh, I really feel honest right now. So I've always been I'd go to every show. I've always like played various instruments, but over the past couple of years, I've always been like, I want to combine music and mindfulness, and I want to find a way to do that. So over the past couple of years, I've released my own album. I tend to do more collaborations nowadays with different artists and DJs where I'll work with them and their music. We'll put together like a journey, and then I'll create my own audio and drop it over the top of theirs. So it's like, I call them dance music guided meditations, where it's like really upbeat music and my own message on top of it during the drops and the transitions. And it's really cool. People really like it. I love it. It's what I think is the antidote. Some people aren't great at meditating. right? It's just not their vibe. But this is like, I call it like kinetic meditation, active mindfulness, where it's you're groovy, you're upbeat, you're moving. And at the same time, you're getting the added benefit of these mindfulness prompts. So I do a lot of that. I'm doing a bunch of cool stuff this year with other artists and DJs, my own radio show that's coming out. So I just love it. It's just the coolest thing in the world that I get to combine these two passions of mine.
Wow. So good. So good. Can't wait to see what's coming next for you. Before we close, I have to bring this up. In a recent post, you had this to say: I'm so grateful I didn't end up with what I thought I wanted. What is something that you thought you wanted in the past that you now are grateful you didn't get?
Well, certainly people. I mean, name any of the lovely women that I've dated in the past. At the time, I was like, this is the person for me. And ultimately it didn't work out. And I think I'm grateful in hindsight, that happened, because I've realized that there's bigger and better and more growth for me in store that I need to go through. Certainly one. I think in my career, I used to think that I wanted to be the biggest entrepreneur in the world. I was obsessed. Forbes 30 under 30. I need the headline. I need this. And it never came to fruition. And I'm really grateful it didn't, because it forced me to take a step back and be like, what is my impact? What impact? I love money. I truly do. I think if you're good at something, you should make boatloads of money from it. But not having that success when I was so focused on it, I think it was the greatest gift ever, because it forced me to be like, okay, what am I truly good at? And what is the potential impact of that? And I think I'm doing it now, and I found it now. And I'm so impact driven that it's so rewarding. And now I'm making money from it, and it's fantastic, and it's only going to increase. Like, that was the order that I needed. And it took losing and failing and being rejected from what I thought I wanted to where I am now. And I think that's the greatest gift. I think it's the greatest gift in the world to change your mind. Sometimes it's changed for you. It's not an option that you have. Either way, you take it as a win. You take that perspective. You say, my past is powerful. It's leading me. It's teaching me. It's not shaping me. It's leading me in a new direction. And I'm just very bought into that. And I'm grateful for everything that happened to me, no matter if it was painful or hurtful or disappointing. It's pointed me in a direction that I've figured it out, and I'm going to keep going. And it just makes me happy to like be able to look at things in my past and my present and have that kind of mentality. And yeah, I love that quote, because I think that's a powerful mindset to have.
Well, I love it. And I'm grateful for you joining me today and sharing your thoughts and perspectives. Tell us where we can get Single is Your Superpower. Tell us where we can get the book.
You can get a newmindsetwhodis.com, all one word, or you can just check out my Instagram, case.kenny. All the links are there.
Awesome. Well, Case, I appreciate you joining me. Listen, I am overdue for a trip to Chicago. So when we get a little free here and we're able to get out, I'm going to take you out for coffee, and maybe, I don't even know if you like hot dogs, but we'll find something for you to eat. How about that?
I love hot dogs. Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. Well, Case, I appreciate you joining me. Thank you so much, and my best to you and all that you have going on.
Thank you. I appreciate you. This is awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, this has been the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. I'm your host, Cornell Jermaine. Until next time, let your soul be made whole. Take care.